Does anybody have any comments before we receive a motion to adopt the agenda?
No comments.
Okay.
I move to accept the agenda as written.
Anyone like second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, agenda as written is adopted. Moving on to the minutes from last month. Are there any comments, concerns, questions regarding the minutes?
I would move to approve the minutes as they were submitted.
All right. Anyone like to second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved as written. We'll move on to public comment.
Okay, I have a public comment that I would like to start off with, and it is going to be quick and sweet. I wrote it down so we could be concise. On behalf of the Bond Oversight Committee, I would like to formally express our appreciation for Tammy Vengeon as this is her last meeting with us. We are all grateful for your meticulous organization and support from the very beginning. You will be missed, and thank you for your 27 years of service to the district. That is a full thing in our notes.
Yes, thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you so much to all of you.
Any other public comments?
Hey, Tammy, can we hire you as like a contractor to keep doing what you're doing for us?
Not sure you can afford me, but you can try.
The link is live now.
Thank you.
I have not received any email or correspondence over the past month from the public. I know Sandy fielded a couple of questions, which I don't know if they were more comments than questions.
That was at the prior, we talked about that at the prior meeting, Riley.
Okay, sorry, that must have been really close to the cutoff there, and I remember the couple of comments from two of the most involved members of our community. Anyone else have any conversations, like to bring anything to the public forum, I guess, in terms of public comment? Okay. We will move on to unfinished business. Communication with the public. I see there's an updated dashboard in the minutes. Can
we have, is there confirmation that that updated dashboard is updated online as well?
It's the information. The new link is up, but apparently it's giving the same message that the host has another meeting in progress.
Yes, I checked on the dashboard online the other day, and it's the June 1st dashboard.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Sandy?
It is the June 1st dashboard that's on the website. It's great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Perfect. Okay. Being that we're kind of coming out of this pandemic issue, is there any further discussion that anyone wants to have regarding additional communication with the public, or does the district have any, plans in motion for the summer, other than kind of electronic posting and bond update, kind of what has been transpiring?
Well, I know we're watching to see what happens with the expectations for school board meetings. the mandate we had to meet like this, those mandates expired July 1. So I think we're going to see what comes out of this next, I guess, wave of information from the state. And we haven't discussed, we'll discuss it on Tuesday night as to whether it will continue in July, because we can continue to have Zoom meetings like this. We'll discuss at our our June 30th meeting, what we want to do for July and probably August. And I'm not sure at this point whether we'll host an open meeting again as we've done in the past. More to come on that.
I think it would be helpful if perhaps the district is prepared to answer questions from the community should we not be able to open up in the fall. I think that people are going to start asking questions. What is a new high school going to look like post-pandemic? And so I think it would be helpful to anticipate some questions from the community and having some statements prepared. If that, I don't know if you've already done that or if that's on the horizon, but I think it would be helpful because I think people are getting antsy. And now with the new face mask requirement for all of Washington State, I think that, people are going to be anticipating.
Yeah. And I think the information from OSPI has been changing and sometimes not quite as clear, but the end of last week, Chris Reichdahl did a presentation that was a little more definitive. And so we'll be talking about that going forward. So point well taken.
Anything else with public comment or communicating with the public?
Okay. I think with the benefit or with the consideration of time, I think we should probably punt on additional alternate members at this point.
I agree.
Unless anybody else feels differently. I guess speak now.
I just, the only thing I would say on that is it's been a while since Kathy's been to a meeting. Does she could still consider herself a part of this? I mean, I don't know. I guess that's my own, I don't know if it's kind of related, I guess. Has anybody heard from her?
Mm-mm. I think that's a great point. I don't recall what the bylaws say, how many meetings can be missed. But I think
3 meetings.
And that's what I thought. Do we know how many she's missed? Is it 2 or is it 3 now?
Well, to
This would be
clarify, I think it's
Or the 4th.
Okay. Then I think Riley and I should have a conversation with her and find out what the situation is, because then can we report back to someone? I'm not sure who, since Tammy's leaving. And we can look at what we need to do for alternates and filling spaces.
Okay.
The oversight shuffle, as I like to call it.
I can ask Linda about plans going forward so that we know who a contact will be for this. I don't know who that is now, and I don't know if Tammy knows or not, but I don't, but I can ask.
For right now, you can absolutely direct everything to me until we get things sorted out.
Okay.
Okay. I guess on that note, we'll move on to 3.03. Review capital bond levy policy, debt policy. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Mark and Cynthia and Sandy as well, I guess, from our side.
Yeah, and I don't know if Andrew, if you want to lead in with any comments. So at the last board meeting, we presented a draft policy to the school board on the debt policy. And the board asked for it to come back to this group and undergo some further review. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Andrew, before we
No, I don't think so. I mean, at this point, we can just go into the review. I think the questions just had to do with, I think, the logistics of it all. So,
Right. So you had raised some questions, some concerns that actually came up at the board meeting as well. Melinda kind of brought up some of the same concerns and questions that you have. And I don't know, did everybody either get the email from Sandy or hear the discussion at the board meeting? The bond
I
oversight.
don't believe everybody did. I think Anya and I are somewhat privy to, but we
Okay.
weren't able to kind of mass distribute anything. All things
So,
considered.
Sandy, do you want to kind of bring up your questions and raise your points? And then Cynthia's here, like she said earlier. I don't know if you were with us yet. She is the with Kano Gates, which is our bond counsel and has been for ever. And she had a good discussion with the board at the meeting about this topic. So we asked her to come, kind of based on your question, that said it would be helpful to hear her address the issue. So she's here to do that.
yeah. So Mark, specifically about this is the financial planner, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
That's one of
question.
Sandy's main concerns. Yes.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
like, I didn't mean to cut you off, Andrew, but I was going to say, just like we have a cost estimator or 3 or 4 of them for the construction to understand, prices and how it all falls together. The GFOA, the Government Financial Officers Association, has a best practice that says you need to get a third-party person if you don't have the board presence or the school district staffing presence for that kind of financial acumen. And heaven's sakes, I don't have that level of technical ability. And I've seen other entities get municipal financial advisors for a very low cost, like Cynthia said, probably in, the $10,000 range. And it would give us a better insight to know on a negotiated sale, especially. I mean, my understanding is State Farm always, or has historically purchased these bonds. I don't, maybe I misheard that at some point, but, just looking at the amortization schedule on the ballot, it said up to 22 years. And, we have bonds for 18 years debt service, and the total interest rate looked great. But just, how are they structured? And my whole comment in the beginning was, I believe it took us 4 times to get this ballot passed. I could be wrong on that count. But for the capital bond measure to pass, I believe it took 4 times. That is a lot of struggle with your constituents on affordability. And if you could have some kind of policy that's just 2 or 3 paragraphs long that outlines, how you're going to do your planning. Next up is going to be Custer, and next one after that is Horizon Gym expansion, or whatever that's going to look like. But have an agreement with your citizens, just very broad stroke overview as the school board to their constituents about, this is our agreement moving forward, and this is how we're going to make it affordable for you, how we're going to plan, market timing. I get all that. That's going to be tough to figure out that part. But I think it's been a struggle. At least I have felt it's been a real struggle the 20 years that I've lived here on North Star Road, to understand how those capital bond measures came together, and there's so much accountability and transparency and all those kind of issues. So I think that's kind of the angle I was coming at it, was a national best practice. The GFOA says it, it's a low cost. We spent $170,000 on bond issuance fees for the first round. I don't know why we're squawking at 10,000.
Well, from the board standpoint, and it's a good question. I think from the board standpoint, we're squawking about a lot of 10,000s. And your point's well made. I mean, we want this public to know that we're being careful with the funds and that we're moving ahead carefully. But we also have legal counsel whose job it is to guide us through this as well. And I think
According
the board,
to speed, I'll stop you there, Andrew, because I don't want you to make that statement. I've heard your superintendent make that statement also, and I worry that somebody's going to come back and say, if bond counsel or the underwriter is not a registered municipal financial advisor, and Cynthia can correct me on this, that you're not supposed to be accepting financial advice from them because only a fiduciary has the best interest of the school district in mind. I wouldn't want you to make an illegal statement right now.
okay, well, maybe we can ask Cynthia to weigh in on that, because I don't think there was a requirement that we have the financial planner, or that there were financial planners with this expertise readily available to take this on. So that's where the board has sort of landed, but I'll pass on to Cynthia.
Sandy, I recognize that you're referring to the GFOA guidelines that have been promulgated on a national basis. And that is that it is in the best interest to have someone who is a fiduciary, that is, who has a fiduciary responsibility to a issuer to provide independent advice with respect to the issuance of bonds. I'm going to take a little detour here. I'm a lawyer, so I have a fiduciary responsibility to the district. So I am a fiduciary as far as the district is concerned. My job is to look out for your best interests. And so I'm not a registered financial advisor, but that's because I don't need to be, because I'm your bond counsel. Now, and I understand it's whatever you think about lawyers, we do have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients. And so I don't have to be a registered financial advisor to already have a fiduciary duty to look out for your best interests. Having said that, I'm not, although I've been doing this for many, many years, and I can tell you the history of bond financing with school districts in the state of Washington, at least for the last 40 plus years. So I can give you a lot of history about how bonds are issued in Washington and the practices here in Washington. And keep in mind, practices in Washington are different than they are in Louisiana, or different than they are in Oklahoma, and somewhat different than they are in Minnesota or California. And so I think that I absolutely recognize the view that is explained by the GFOA guidelines, having to do with, it's a good idea for you to have someone independent advising you. Because technically your bond underwriter is a contractor. In other words, they're buying your bonds, you're selling the bonds. And so you need to feel comfortable. You need to feel comfortable that they're doing a good job for you. And in that respect, I would suggest that part of all of this has to do with the degree of comfort that you have with the contractor that you deal with. And frankly, that applies to every contract that you have. It has to do with your level of confidence that they're doing a good job for the district. Whether it's somebody coming in and installing light bulbs, or whether it's somebody coming in and selling your bonds, you should always feel comfortable that the person you're dealing with, regardless of public bid requirements or anything, actually is doing a good job for you. And so that has been historically the rationale for how school districts proceed with respect to their bond issue. I'm going to take a step back, just a little bit of a step back, and that is there are two ways in which a school district enters the bond market. When you enter the bond market, you're basically going out and you're borrowing money for a 20-year period, at least. You're borrowing money for a 20-year period, and you're working with someone who's going to sell your bonds to the general public. And there are two ways in which you can sell your bonds to the general public. The first way is a competitive sale. You basically put a notice out and invite every underwriter in the country to come and bid on your bonds. And that's a competitive sale. Back in the early 1980s, it was state law that all these bonds, all your school district bonds, had to be sold by competitive sale. It was before technology, so people used to run in with bids, written bids, and send them. So you all sold them by competitive sale. And then in the 1980s, frankly, the financial markets were very volatile. And so it was recognized that it wasn't practical to publish notice 6 weeks ahead of time and then sell your bonds, let's say on July 15th. What happens if the markets are going crazy on July 15th? You needed to be able to adjust it and work with an underwriter who would time the sequence of your sale. And so state law, in effect, was amended in the mid-80s to say that bonds no longer had to be sold by competitive sale because it wasn't the most efficient way to sell bonds. You should be able to work with a specific underwriter that you have chosen and then time your entry into the market along with that underwriter to do the best sale at the best time. And so starting in the mid-1980s, almost all bond issues in Washington were then sold with a negotiated sale process, which meant that you went through a process or you worked through a process where you developed a relationship with an underwriter, had the positive experience with that underwriter about their experience in this area and how they placed bonds. You worked with other districts and checked out, these are people who do a really good job. So you basically did a negotiated sale. And so Ferndale School District in the mid-80s transitioned to doing a negotiated sale process, meaning that you worked with a specific banking firm that you had a relationship with, that knew who you were, that basically had a good reputation in the industry, and you worked through that negotiated sale process with that particular banking firm. And that's basically how it's been for Ferndale School District since the mid-80s. In Washington, as I said, starting in the 1980s, mid-80s, almost 100% of all bond issues for school districts were sold through this negotiated sale process. And there were several underwriters who were in this business and were well known to the industry, and districts worked with a specific underwriter. From time to time they changed, but for the most part, a relationship was established and stayed consistent. And so a negotiated sale was that process. Now there are some issuers who are very large, and I give you examples. Let's say your Lake Washington School District and your Issaquah School District. They basically both continue to do negotiated sales, but they also bring on, because they're doing, $150 million bond issues, they also bring in a financial advisor to provide additional comfort to the district, to the staff, that in effect, the whole process is operating in accordance with the best market that you can get. The best market that you can get, and the pricing was appropriately done.
Can I stop you and ask a question?
Yes.
Clarifying question. Okay. You said that bringing in a separate financial advisor provides additional comfort to the district, to who else?
To the district and its board.
Okay. And what about the community? This is, so that what I'm hearing from you is that that this negotiated sales process that the Ferndale School District has been doing since the mid 80s is business as usual. What is different is the climate in the community has changed significantly. And what I believe Sandy has been pushing forward for the school district to do is to adopt a policy that brings in that third party to provide the additional comfort. Am I wrong here, Sandy? Am I misunderstanding?
I think that's exactly it. And it's, I mean, comfort, I know state law for services and everything up to now is fine. Mark can go out and choose whoever he wants for bond counsel or underwriter. I get that. It's all about a comfortableness for that. We have a huge affordability issue. We have a demographic that's changing in Ferndale. We've got, you know, it took us 4 pushes and I'm tired. I want this to be solved for the community going forward. And I see no way out. And this is the easiest sunshine to put on all of this and to come up with a plan. I don't get why this is such an uphill push.
I could let Mark speak. I'm not sure that it's an overall uphill push. Quite frankly, I really wanted to put this all in the context of what the overall debt policy was intended to accomplish. Because if, for example, you were doing a competitive sale as opposed to the negotiated sales, then you absolutely must have a financial advisor to guide you through that process. The only exception is I work with a number of really teeny tiny school districts. They can't afford to pay a financial advisor. So I'm the only person in the room who can help them through the bond issuance process. They just can't afford to have a financial advisor. Now, having said that, that's not you. You could easily, quote unquote, afford to have a financial advisor. I think that part of this discussion isn't just about the financial advisor, but it's about making a decision as to whether or not you want to continue to have negotiated sales or continue to have competitive sale or move to a competitive sale process. So in Washington, the vast majority, or maybe not vast, but the majority, strong majority of bonds that are sold by school districts continue to be sold in a competitive sale process. And as opposed to a negotiated sale process, as opposed to being sold in a competitive process. So for example, Bellevue always sells its school bonds by a competitive sale process. Lake Washington, North Shore, Issaquah always use the negotiated sale process. Federal Way uses the competitive sale process. That's another thing that your group should decide. Do we need to make a bigger change? If as part of what you hope to have as overall transparency, you could easily work with a financial advisor who could give you an independent view at the time of pricing that the underwriter that you selected is doing a good job. If the board and this committee believe that this would give you better credentials with respect to the bond sale process, it's possible. It may not even be $10,000. And so if in fact it moves your bar by an inch, you could actually do that. I wanted to suggest that based on my experience, and I'm not a market reader, I just do a lot of bonds. I have absolutely no reason to believe that your bonds have not been fairly and accurately priced in the past. But if there are people out there who have concerns about that, you could employ the services of a financial advisor to give you that extra validation. You could do that. I don't think that the administration, by not having done it before, has been thinking, oh, it's just the same way or the highway about this. I think they have been thinking about the costs of issuance and, you know, and is it justified? Does it help? And so I think that's a policy decision as to whether or not, as far as your board is concerned or the community is concerned, would it give you more credentials with your community if you said, yes, when we sell bonds, we have an independent financial advisor who came in and said, this was the right way to do it. And this is what you did was the right thing to do. So I'm not trying to suggest this one way or the other. I also say that we have a deputy state treasurer who used to be a financial advisor and who came to this state from California. And he also would be willing to talk to you individually, Sandy, or any member of the board about his view. Of course, he believes that a financial advisor could be a good prophylactic as far as the board is concerned. But I think that's his view. And actually, he's easy to reach, and I could give you his phone number and you could talk to him independently. I just wanted to make the point that at the meeting, I would tell you, because I'm actually a fiduciary, I'm a fiduciary to the district. If I really thought that there was, that your sale process could be improved or it would yield better results, I would have the obligation to tell you. I have no personal reason based on my experience with the district to think that anything that the district has done in the last 20 years has been anything other than above board and in the best interests of the district. And so I can tell you that. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just speaking to you based on my experience in connection with the issuance of bonds.
Thanks. And I think that from the board standpoint, when we had our discussion, I mean, one of the things that we said was, we have a lot of confidence in Cynthia as the fiduciary as well as our legal counsel. And to be quite honest, I don't recall any questions about, did we have a financial planner on board? I just don't recall anyone raising that as an issue or a concern except on this committee. And so I don't know if we really get a big bang for the buck if we spend $10,000 more, or if we spend $10,000 and people will say, well, that was stupid. I don't know. I can't read how this might play in the community, but to my knowledge, no one has raised it as an issue that we've done anything other than did really well on the first bond sale. And we've got a company we've worked with for a couple decades, and Cynthia as well. So I'll step back and let the Oversight Committee discuss, but that's sort of where the board landed.
I also should make some point. I have no connection with your bond underwriter. I mean, other than the fact that I know they are. I'm a lawyer. I work for a law firm, and I'm your bond counsel. I work with a number of underwriters. I work with financial advisors. I work with underwriters. I don't have a stake in this game. I have nothing to gain one or the other from saying it's just, but want to point that out.
Well, I would like to point out that I don't think that the Bond Oversight Committee is interested in making any recommendations about moving to competitive sale process. That's not the point. I think that our point is to advocate for the community who are voting for these bonds and for future bonds and levies. And I think it is in the best interest to follow best practices that have been brought forth by Sandy. And it has been an incredible learning process for sure, and overwhelming. And Cynthia, thank you for explaining as much as you did, because that has been a tremendous background and context for, I think, everyone on the call. I do think that I feel strongly in the amount of work that has been put forth by this committee to have a formal recommendation that the board considers a debt policy. And there's been an example provided in the packet that is 4 paragraphs long, and it is a sign of transparency. It's an acknowledgement to the community, and I think that sometimes we need to figure out how to mitigate that And Andrew, in your position, if I were in your position, I agree with you 100%. You have, the district has a fantastic relationship with Cynthia's firm, years of history there, awesome, wonderful. However, all of Sandy's points are true. And so as we are representing the community, we are the Community Bond Oversight Committee, I think it's worth the board considering moving forward with some type of debt policy, if not for this particular bond, for future bond sales. This is a step in the right direction for shining sunshine on this type of thing. We want people to build confidence in the district. And, you know, if there's a lot of gray area and we don't think it's important and we get brushed aside, I mean, that's not what we want to be showing the public. So I would like to discuss if people on the committee feel the same way, to make a formal recommendation that a debt policy is considered. And again, you don't have to follow anything that we say, Andrew. It's just something that I think that we feel strongly about.
Yeah, and the board wants to be open to your recommendations and will be. And I don't think there's any pushback on having a debt policy, other than if we don't need to spend extra dollars because we've got this in place. I don't know, to me it can go either way. We can either be really great stewards, or we can be viewed as spendthrifts who already have a fiduciary and our attorney guiding us through this in a long-term relationship, and the results have been good. So I can't speak for the board other than say that we can, we're open to your recommendation. If you want to send one back to us, we certainly will discuss it.
I think the point is we have legal counsel for the bond, but we have no financial counsel.
Well, we have Cynthia is a fiduciary for us.
She's a lawyer. She's not a CPA.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I would actually like to talk, take Cynthia up. I have been talking to the state treasurer's office, not the person that Cynthia has mentioned, but actually somebody that runs the bond program for the state of Washington. We've been talking all along for this past year. A number of us on this committee were around during the bond task force, and we know a lot of the comments that were made even back then. I think even if you don't adopt a debt policy, Andrew, I think having a statement by the board that creates a public engagement might be really good for perhaps more the conservative demographic, for them to have a place to engage with the board. So maybe you don't head in a policy direction, but you head in a statement and you have some kind of engagement around it. I mean, you talk about the capital bond that they passed was 112 million. The interest on top of that is, I mean, 120 million, and we're balking at spending 10,000 or less on a financial advisor. And Cynthia, I don't want to push you on this, but I will ask the state treasurer's office if they view you as a fiduciary for the district in your interactions as bond counsel.
No, that's the reason I suggested you call. I am a fiduciary for the district, but I will completely acknowledge, as I just said, even though I was an accounting major undergraduate, I am not a financial advisor. I am an attorney who does the legal work for the district. My experience is based on the experience that I've had in connection with multiple bond issues over the years, but I would never hold myself out as being your financial advisor.
I just want to make that clear, because the superintendent and Andrew have made that comment in study sessions and have made it publicly. And I would love to.
I have never said that she is our financial planner. I said she is a fiduciary for us, but I've never said she was a financial planner. No one has said that she's a financial planner.
And we don't need to argue about the term because the fiduciary is the same thing, Andrew.
Well, I'm not arguing about a term. I'm arguing about the statement that I've made a statement that she's a financial planner, and I've never said that.
Okay, well, even making the statement that she's a fiduciary for the district, I believe the state needs to clarify that definition.
Okay.
It means that I have a duty to you to look after your overall best interests. And that's my duty, is to look after your best interests. I am not a pricing. I cannot tell you on the day of pricing that you could never have gotten a better price for your bonds. That's not my area of expertise. If I saw or believed that you were doing something that was inappropriate for your community, I would have a duty to you to let you know that. But I cannot be the person who says on the morning of pricing, boy, you got the best deal you ever got in your life. That's not my role. And so that's the limit of it. In spite of my actually being an accounting major 1,000 years ago. And I understand that there are differences here. I think this will have to ultimately be worked out. Should there be a view that you should get someone to have a second look at the time of pricing, I think it is possible to find someone who would do it for hopefully less than the number that's been quoted. But I don't know. I don't negotiate those contracts. Keep in mind, I am not acting on behalf of an underwriter or a financial advisor. And you are certainly more than welcome to speak to Jason Richter, who is the Deputy State Treasurer, who has experience in this area, and take his additional advice along these regards.
Do you have some names of financial planners who do this type of work? Because it's not just a financial planner down the street. It's going to be someone with expertise in bond sales.
There's basically three, could be three entities who actually could provide that external expertise, and you might be able to negotiate a price that would be reasonable under the circumstances. And again, a district, let's say like Washington or Issaquah, also for the benefit of the board, et cetera, will always have, even though they're doing negotiated sales, they will have someone come in and validate that. It's really a policy decision on your part. And so to the extent it brings any more comfort to you, I think it could be managed and hopefully managed in an economic fashion, and also in an honorable fashion. Any names that I would give you would be people who would be honorable. Just letting you know that it'd be skilled and honorable.
So I would like to motion that Sandy's debt policy that was part of the packet be forwarded as a official recommendation to the board, and bless and release this from our care. Does anyone know what to do next?
Are we looking for a second, Anya?
Yes, we're looking for a second.
I'd like to second that.
Okay. Okay, and then Riley, do you want to call all in favor?
Yeah. We're referring, just for clarification purposes, are we referring to the administrative policy F6023?
We're referring to the half-page document that was included in the board packet that's called Debt Policy Example.
Right below that, Riley, the debt.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Page 17.
Yep.
Piece. Okay.
It is a much more obtuse approach to what was put in front of the board last meeting or 2 meetings ago.
Last meeting.
Okay.
Meetings ago.
Last official meeting.
Okay.
Regular meeting. Regular business meeting.
Okay, so all in favor of all in favor of, I guess, how do you want to state it, Anya?
Making a formal
Apologize.
recommendation to the board of adopting a debt policy, and we're providing the example. And
All in
therefore,
favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Okay, we therefore bless and release this to the board. Good luck, Andrew.
Thank you.
okay, moving on.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Cynthia?
Yeah.
I'll leave the meeting. Thank you. I hope you are efficient for the rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you.
So next item is reviewing our quarterly report. So I don't know if I might have the ability to share my screen. I don't know if anybody wants to look through the report together, and I don't know if you have an editable version you can kind of mark up as we go.
So what I would like to do is, if everyone has the report in front of them, the board, the Bond Oversight Committee, if you have the report in front of you, if there are changes you would like to make tonight, I have it up on my screen and I will make the changes, and then I can submit it to Tammy so that they can put it towards the, put it in front of the board of directors, the school board.
Okay. Do you want me to share my screen so everybody can see it? Would that be helpful?
Does everyone not have it?
Well,
Okay, who's the host? Can someone allow me to share my screen?
I think you got that, Tammy, because it says I tried to activate it, it wouldn't let me.
Okay, here we go. All right, here we are. Okay, let me close some of this business here. Okay, our first comment, let me see here. My question is that this is for Q1, and this is our fourth report, and Q1 should be January through March. And I know, Riley, you changed it to April. Do we want to include this in April as well? Or won't April be included in the Q2?
I was just thinking it would include through April because there's discussion topics that took place.
Is everyone okay with that if we just have it more comprehensive through April?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. And then we did meet 3 times since the last report, so that is correct. Okay. Okay, the dashboard has been updated. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that thread. Okay, so these numbers here that are in the gray, I took those from, what was it? I believe I took this from the, there was some confusion about what numbers should be reflected here because I think it was reflecting the target and not the final program, the numeric program that was finalized.
well, those may have been the numbers for, you know, back in that time frame.
Right. And so that's where I'm wondering if, like, I think that this is, it's fine the way it is unless, because this is prior to the numeric program being finalized. And that's what we're reporting on. Comments, concerns, insults?
I'm wondering if I'm just throwing this out there. I'm wondering if that's even helpful to have that in there.
Right.
It's changed so much. I mean, It's just maybe just get confusing. That's all I'm thinking.
Can I ask a question to Andrew? When this report is being read at the board level, does this make sense? Do we need to be including something like that? You're already looking at those numbers anyway from a different angle.
Yeah, we are already looking at the schematics and
You have the
presentations on, and this next meeting, we're going to talk even more about the plans for square footage usage.
So does anyone have any comments of what we should put in the section? Would someone like to make a recommendation?
I think we should get rid of that.
The whole square feet section?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay, anyone else?
I think we're past that point.
Okay, let's see here. All right, then there's this last section I wanted to touch base on the concerns here. Mark added concerns about the proposed location of the new CTE facility and the size. There was a lot of talk amongst the school board members. In fact, gosh, stop moving. Okay. Amongst the school board members and faculty about Ferndale having one of the best CTE programs in the state. The question is if the planned square footage allows that to continue and allow for room to growth in the future. Is that the statement, Mark Harding? Is that what you would like to have in this report?
I think that's satisfactory.
Okay. Is everyone else okay with this? Can we continue to keep it?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
To some extent, yeah. No, it's good. We should reflect that it hasn't been all sunshine and flowers.
And my last and final question is this was part of a dialogue that had been ongoing. And Sandy, you had wrote a lot of these concerns and thoughts. I don't see how this fits in the report. Is there anything that we need to keep in this, in the yellow section, or shall I just delete it for the report?
Actually, I want to clarify that yellow section, I believe, was out of Brian Lynch's email one time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And again, some of these comments are about things that happened so long ago. I still have concerns about the shop and some other configurations of the CTE, but I mean, this isn't, yeah. And then, you know, wasn't that yeah. I think we can scrap a lot of that at the end. I mean, those are a lot of just kind of just
I think in the next report that's coming a lot faster than we think it is, would you like to tackle the CTE concerns for the report?
I'd like to work with Mark on that.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to delete that. And I will go ahead and incorporate, I don't know how to incorporate this right now while we're live, but I will incorporate this and send this final version to Tammy. Are there any other concerns or questions that people have?
I have just one little minor correction. It's pretty small, but on the third page where it says School Construction Aid Program, SCAP, in bold.
I don't see it. Is it SCAP or is it spelled out?
It's a bold heading.
Right here?
Yes, so it's actually School Construction, not aid, but assistance program.
Okay.
That's all. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tex. Making us look good. Anything else, friends?
I am kind of curious from Andrew's perspective, how much of this is just old news?
Well, some of it's old news, but that doesn't negate wanting to hear the perspective from the Bond Oversight Committee.
Okay.
I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise for us. None of this should be a surprise, but I think it's important that I mean, it expands the communication, and we see what you understand and what we understand, and it can raise questions and stuff. And so I think that there's nothing in here that you will go over that anyone will yawn about and go, well, yeah, we know all this.
Okay.
Because it's a different perspective from the Oversight Committee, and it gives either a sense of we're all of the folks who are doing a lot of this work are on the right track, or that there are some concerns.
Okay.
So I think it's important that you not try to tailor it to what you think the school board wants, but you report as a committee what you think is important to note.
I think it's nice to have feedback though, Andrew. Like,
Yeah,
it helps us
absolutely.
feel more confident in what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Real quick, can we just look at that thing that Mark wrote about the CTE, that paragraph?
Yes.
100% concern. Yeah, I mean, I'd almost see that last sentence end in a question mark rather than a period.
You okay with that, Mark Harding?
I'm rereading it now that it's actually showed up on my screen.
Well, Mark
Yeah,
is
I've got the question mark. Yeah.
I think that that's a nice touch, because in addition to it going to the board as an advisory committee, this would be available to the public also. And it's kind of to ask them to start thinking about it.
The only other thing you might want to add to that, and I'm not sure how the wording would be, you can help me with that, basically that concern led to a lot of engagement from school district and CTE program, teachers, directors, staff, whatever you want to say, faculty, into looking for modifications. I don't know, maybe some wording like that, I think it did stimulate a lot more conversation within the school district from our questioning of the CTE program, the way it was originally designed in the new school. Brian, would you agree?
Should we say CTE staff? Is that all encompassing? Jeremy, is that what you would call the folks that help? Were there people on the CTE advisory group too?
I'm sorry, Anya, what are you asking me?
What's the best way to encompass the CTE folks that helped inform the conversation around the planned square footage and the space that we had a couple months ago, the conversation we had a couple months ago?
Well, I personally want limited to that. I mean, Jeremy was very instrumental in bringing them back together, right, as a group. So yeah, I guess, would that be faculty, staff is the first question.
I think there's 12 CTE teachers. I know that are you referring to the agriculture teachers?
Just in general, that meeting that you had, that Brian, I think Brian was there, that I was at.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I think that was all.
Right, I mean,
the entire CTE staff was there.
Yeah, so I guess I would just add to that is that our concerns, I think, did help lead to more work or investigation or more interaction, right? Like that meeting to clarify things with the CTE group.
Our concerns led to greater conversation and further input from CTE staff.
And interaction with the district.
Say that one more time, you kind of cut out.
No, I'm trying to get out a lot. Sure, why'd you make me try to remember what I just said? And more interaction with the school district on development planning of the CTE program as a whole.
I'm no Tammy Benden. All right. Why don't you work on that and put it in the, paste it in the chat feature, and then I will cut and paste that in there and make it look good.
Pretty nice.
Is that all right?
Yep, that'll save time.
Any other comments or concerns for the report?
And is that going to be presented next week? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Then this is what we will go ahead with, barring that sentence or two tops from Mark Harding. Then we will go ahead and submit this. I will get it to Tammy and make sure that Oversight Committee has the final draft. That's all for me. I'm going to stop sharing.
How much I didn't look, how much, I just went onto the SharePoint site. I can't find where you posted that. Did anybody else, I mean, I have no, did anybody else see it on the SharePoint site? Did you see it, Anya? I can't.
On the SharePoint site?
Yeah, I can't find that where we posted, you know, a kind of a master draft that we could basically all work from with comments.
So it's in my OneDrive that I've shared out to all of the Bond Oversight Committee.
Oh, it's in the OneDrive. So it's not on the,
My personal
from Anya.
oh. Because we don't have the ability to upload to the SharePoint site. We don't have the rights.
I believe that's correct.
Maybe we could have that, or you and Riley could have that, so that we could. I don't know. I really liked how we could just make comments on one master draft rather than having to have 7 different versions of it. I don't know. I thought it was an efficient way of doing it, but.
I agree with you. Let's streamline that process for future documents.
Okay.
I like that too, because I can't remember when I like retrospectively go back and try to write things. So it's nice to have a living document that we can kind of keep up to date as we're going through the meetings too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will make sure that I connect with Tammy before she leaves on the 30th. To streamline best practices for us for that. Okay, Riley. Carry us forward.
All right. Next item is discussion regarding recommendations and changes to proposed CTE area. So I assume this is in relation to the Golden Eagle Academy and what's the other acronym?
Ferndale Virtual Academy.
Ferndale Virtual Academy. Yeah. So. I guess, Jeremy, we know what it is. I believe there was a discussion at the school board meeting. I don't know if you would kind of give the cliff notes on that, or
Yeah,
where
well,
we're at, or what your.
Last time we met, you guys asked me for kind of a time frame. So I've provided you that, kind of with the history of everything and where we are and how we got to where we are. So I think it kind of ended up coming back. Andrew, I don't want to misspeak here.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, at the Bond Oversight Committee meeting last month was the first time we had heard of the proposal, and I wanted to be sure the board members were aware of it. After discussing it at the board meeting, it was pretty clear that really what we needed was to bring it back to the Bond Oversight Committee, because it is a deviation from what was originally said, and get a recommendation from the Bond Oversight Committee about whether or not it's felt to be an appropriate move for us to make to utilize the old CTE building for other programs, or if that's going to create too much distrust about what was said and what was done. And that's where the board wanted it to come back for a recommendation.
Well, I definitely appreciate having the content, Jeremy. Thank you for putting that together.
Yeah.
It provides a lot more context and thoughtful. It enables us to have a thoughtful recommendation.
Sure.
And so, does anyone from the Oversight Committee have any concerns or questions about the program that, or the proposal that Jeremy is putting forward? And does everyone have the document in front of them?
I have it on my screen if you want me to share it, if that would help.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah. Maybe.
I guess I have a general question for Jeremy.
Yeah.
What do you think the chances are that no matter what the board says or that space is just ends up getting used out of necessity because it's so tight from a square footage standpoint in the school?
Zero. I mean, honestly, we're building the school right now to fit all our students.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know. I would say I don't see I mean, I spend, oh goodness, 10 to 15 hours a week with Dykeman doing test fits with different programs. And so, I'm not seeing that huge concern right now with square footage. There's other ends too. I got 3 science classes right now teaching chemistry and biology in 900 square foot classrooms. And in the new building, they're going to be to standard at 1450. So there's, it's balanced out, but Brian, I'd just say right now it's not built into the master schedule at all to have to use and move over to there. Our
Okay.
current master schedule fits into the new building.
And Riley, is this, and Anya, are we talking about the current design in this particular agenda item, or are we just talking about using CTE building for?
We're talking about correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is we're talking about the essentially the trade for taking these programs, moving them into the a 2-3 classroom portion of the existing CTE building, which then allows space in the existing Performing Arts Center to be used for additional
CTE programming. Yeah.
Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It really, it's more on the end of the Golden Eagle Academy, Ferndale Virtual Academy, as you can imagine, even since we've last spoke about this, are growing. And those are good options for our community members to stay within our district. And right now we're at about 90 kids, and it's split 45 and 45. So if you remember Golden Eagle Academy, I take 4 classes at Ferndale High School, and then I take 4 classes online through the Edgenuity program. Ferndale Virtual Academy, I'm 100% on the Edgenuity online program, but I do come in once a week, once a month to check in on various items. And but we've grown and grown and grown every year in those, and we are going to continue to see those numbers grow even more. I think, speaking to other principals in the area, Bellingham, we are one of the only, with Ferndale Virtual Academy, we're one of the only alternative learning programs in this area. Options is not an alternative learning program, alternative learning education, but Ferndale Virtual Academy is. And so, to me, that's an appeal to families even outside of our district, where that's an option that other districts don't necessarily have. I have principals coming to me asking me about Edgenuity and Ferndale Virtual Academy, and those are Bellingham principals and others. So this is something it's on their radar. I'm getting sidetracked a little bit, but I just want you guys to kind of understand these are really important programs to our district. So to me, we need that we need just more space for them. You know, when we were designing and putting together this building in Shannon's program, obviously we're going to move them into the art rooms, and that gave them more room. But then we needed to keep the art programs there, and so it just, we didn't see the growth that until, you know, well, no, I shouldn't say it. We've always seen the growth. So then I think, Riley, to answer your question, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. Using that current space in the PAC for CTE support in some way or the other. It has a studio attached to it. So whether that's our video production program or whether it's our photography program, you know, it gives us the space that we need, and, you know, gives us a classroom. You know, that's, I don't want to say extra, but it gives us another classroom, which is good.
What kind of money are you going to have to put into the CTE, the current CTE building, in order to make it sustainable on its own?
I think Mark can answer this better, but we have to, you know, there's money in the bond project right now for some sort of heating system, because the current heating system is in Old Main. Because even if we just use it for storage, we have to have some level of heat. But I know Mark is still working on that. So Brian, answer your question, you know, it's already in the bond project. It wouldn't be any more, we would not be spending any more money by moving those two programs over there.
I guess that it goes into my next question, which is, you know, the original discussion is that that building is one of the worst on campus.
Yep.
Score-wise. And, you know, the statement was and has been, and I have made it to people, that it's not worth renovating, keeping. So for me to, I guess, feel comfortable, it needs to be that area, whatever area that is, the, you know, 2 classrooms, office space, and some restrooms. I think there's a need to raise those up to an adequate level beyond just putting a new furnace in. And I understand, you know, we're all well aware of the budget piece of that.
I'd like to pull out just a little bit and ask a clarifying question, is that how is it that we missed this group when planning?
I wouldn't say we missed it. So when we were putting together the original, I can't think of the term right now. What's before the ed specs?
Numeric.
Thank you. The numeric program.
I'm getting it.
Yeah, nice job. So when we were putting together the numeric program, we had the ceramics and the fine art. So our 2D and our 3D art were going to be in the new building. And so we were going to move this program into those 2 rooms, which is a beautiful space. It has outside access to it, kind of what we're trying to capture there. And it allows for growth. It allows for all the different areas that she needs. It has the bathrooms there. It has, again, like I said, outside access. So we didn't miss it. It was factored in. But then as we were going along and we determined that we needed to keep 2D and 3D art into the equation, then that put her program back into that space. And which, you know, what I'm trying to say is we weren't at a point where we're adding square footage at that anywhere else either.
So then I guess my next question is that if this program continues to grow, like what's the long-term trajectory of this program, and how's the district preparing to accommodate those needs? I mean, to me, this is a Band-Aid for the 2020, 2021, I'd say that fast 6 times, school year, and maybe the next year. So 21 and 22. So like, what's the long goal here?
So I wouldn't say it's a Band-Aid. If you look at the stuff I've sent you before, I think from the last one, we've grown in this program every year, even before the hold on a second. Sorry about that. So it's grown every year, Anya, even before the pandemic. I think we doubled this year. And part of that is just because we've grown the capacity. This last year, we added a math teacher, and we've also added the Ferndale Virtual Academy. The last 4 years, we just had the Golden Eagle Academy. So that's helped our growth. We now can offer actually K-12 through Edgenuity. So I'd say the long-term trajectory, it's it's growing, pandemic or not, as I think as education changes, as parents change. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What would be your recommendation for planning for space in the next five years? I mean,
well, yeah. I think we need a space
solution. What is
sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. I think the long term, Anya, if I'm hearing you right, would be to be able to offer K-12, at least at the middle school, which we've started, but we need those separate spaces, just because you don't want the high school, you don't want an 18-year-old mixing with a 12-year-old mixing with a 6-year-old.
Right.
Consultation space. So, I see this as a program that is growing, again, pandemic or no pandemic.
From a physical location standpoint, I think with the next bond issue, the next kind of phase of construction down the road, when the old CTE building becomes eligible for state match, you have to look at a more long-term solution than that building, because I think you and Riley are both kind of getting at that building, that physical structure is not a long-term solution.
Right.
But farther down the road, we now know that we can get the funds from the state to help with renovations, which we didn't understand to be the case.
Does anyone remember when that becomes eligible?
2024, I believe, or 2025.
Yeah, it's June of 2024. Now, there is, it becomes eligible in the big picture, but there's several kinds of eligibility. So that doesn't mean that year there's going to be money available from the state, because their formulas get pretty complicated, but it's based on your overall square footage. So it might not be for some years, further down before that, becomes an option for providing, state funding for you. But the building itself will become eligible for that at that point in time. But again, it goes into the bigger formula overall district-wide.
Mm-hmm.
So if we put money into that building for those 3 classrooms, will the entire facility, the entire 30,000 square feet, basically be usable?
It's the money that we're putting into it. We actually, in fact, just did a site walkthrough last week with our HVAC engineer, and came up with what probably is going to be a lower cost option than what we were originally looking at, because with the way that building phases, we're going to be conducting the CTE classes in there for a while, where we're building the new building. Mm-hmm. And the after Old Main is had the heat disrupted. So there's going to have to be we're going to have temporary heat during the transition, which will transition into more permanent heat, but it's a lower cost. They're looking at heating each room individually, as opposed to putting in a whole new boiler system. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, the money that will be put into that building is money that we're gonna have to put into that building anyway. Even if it's unused, we're gonna have to do something about the heat in the short term, and then also it's gonna have to continue on even to use as storage. And there's a little bit of roof patching that's gonna have to be done because we're not gonna put the money into it to put a whole new roof on it. But that's money that's gonna have to be spent no matter what we do at that building.
Yeah, so they'll individually heat every room in the building.
But you'll do it to different level, right? So the buildings, the rooms that are occupied, you heat at an occupied level. The rooms that we're just using as storage, you put a whole different heating setup in there.
Yeah, but because of the phasing, really, because every room will actually have full occupancy heat. Yeah. And then you said the roof needs to be patched, and the water issues will likely be fixed with because of the new school, the flooding.
Hopefully they'll be improved. but I
Okay.
don't know that they'll be fixed on that area.
Okay.
So Andrew, what was the board hoping that we would do? Like, what is the goal here?
Well, you know, one of the concerns that was discussed at the Bond Oversight Committee carried forward to the discussion we had at the board meeting, which was public perception. Is there enough of a positive to this for us to get a recommendation that the Bond Oversight Committee feels like it's appropriate to move forward with this proposal?
That's one of the key tasks. Sorry,
Yeah.
Andrew, didn't mean to jump
That's
in.
good.
One of the key tasks of the Bond Oversight Committee is to make sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do as part of the bond project,
Right.
right? So this is a substantial deviation from what we told voters when we went out and asked for the money to run the bond. So the question to you guys is the kind of the community accountability group, is this a good enough justification to vary the plan or not? And I think the board is looking for you to tell them, yeah, this makes sense and we think the community will understand this, or yeah, no, this is not what you said and we don't think you should move forward with it.
Honestly, I think we're at like 50% here. Like, my personal opinion is we're at 50% here. What I would want to know as a community member is, what is the long-term trajectory of this program and its needs, so that, you know, when it won't be a surprise when there's a new bond request out there saying, hey, remember how we had to do this? Well, here's how we're going to address it. I think that while Jeremy, while you may have conversations about what the future may look like, the board may have conversations about what the future may look like, I don't think that there's a general consensus in the community that we have a long-term 50-year plan, or 15-year plan for that matter. And I know things like this exist, but obviously this wasn't addressed, and we do need to figure it out. I would hate for these students to not be served in the ways that they need to be served. And honestly, I think the students' needs come above the voters, and sorry, people who don't like that idea. But I still think we need to know like what the long-term plan is for this program, especially if it's growing. Then it needs to have more support, and it needs to have a greater feasibility plan in the future.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes.
At our last meeting, like you said, we discussed, and you addressed Annie's point, but we addressed that it was basically looked like we're lying to the community. You made it very clear that if this happened, it's the board members that take the brunt of being called lying to the community. You didn't really touch on that in your last comment. So the board basically feels good about the decision to move forward with this, to take the brunt of being accused of lying, or is the board thinking you dump it on the BOC as far as misleading the public?
I don't think that it's a feeling that we're dumping it on the BOC. And at the last meeting, I was probably more leaning that thinking it was a board decision, but I don't think that anymore. I think that given the fact of all the planning and the expensive funds that we're going through, that's really a board decision. So the rest of the board felt the same way. I don't think we're trying to dump anything from the community on you. I think that if you say you think it's a reasonable decision, I think those who are going to view it as something, you know, tricky are going to view it as something tricky, and it's going to be the district no matter what the Bond Oversight Committee thinks. I think that in fact that what the board would like would be to know that from the Bond Oversight Committee, they think it's a reasonable plan, and that the trade-off of what we said and now what we're doing with the CTE building is appropriate and that it's reasonable to present to the community that we made this change and we have the support of bond oversight. I mean, the ultimate decision, I guess, will go back to the district, but we'd like to make that
Absolutely.
decision
Yes.
with the support of the bond oversight committee, or walk away from it if you feel like it's just not feasible given whatever the reasons might be.
I think the community that's going to have the biggest issue with it is the CTE community. And I'm kind of curious, has this idea been bounced off them at all as far as, how they feel about this?
I've talked about it directly with Mark Schneider. I don't want to quote him, but he and I have discussed it. Edwin and I have discussed it. I'm sure a few other people have been in on those conversations. And again, I don't want to misrepresent anybody, but to my recollection, no one objected to that, of using the current CTE space for this program.
And I know that from the district standpoint, one of the things that we like about the new design is that it puts CTE sort of front in the campus and it's highly visible. And, the students who are going to these academies, I think, benefit from not being right in the middle of everything, but being on campus, but not being in the middle of campus. And so it seems like a good trade-off, but granted, that trade-off comes with some baggage. And so that's where we're coming back to the Oversight Committee and just asking for your thoughts and a recommendation on it's worth pursuing or it's just too controversial given
Right.
sentiment in the community that we shouldn't go down that path.
For me, I would say that I would never want to get involved in looking at how to provide these kind of educational services. I mean, I think these details are something that I never signed up for on the Bond Oversight Committee. So I would want to see like a capital plan for the next 10 years. What are you doing with Mountain View? What other facilities do you have? What are your projections for students? Kind of like what Anya and Riley were talking about, just kind of in the future, what are you going to be using?
And Jeremy, from a timeline standpoint, can we pull that information together and still stay on track with what we need to do? And I don't know.
No, I'll be, I want to be as transparent as possible. So right now we're looking at the CTE, the new CTE test fits, and we need to know if we're going to be able to use this space or not before we move forward with the current layout. So, for example, we're looking at our photography and our video production and what their needs are. And right now we're trying to fit those all into the new CTE building. And if we added this space, that would help. That would determine that. Am I being clear? Is that making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that the
The
timeline is pretty tight right now.
I think it's a point well taken that, particularly given where we are with the pandemic and everything else, I'm guessing we're going to see more requests for participation going forward that necessitate a 10-year plan. And what are we going to do, and what options do we have to take it other places?
Yeah.
And I think this is maybe the first step in that.
Yeah.
And may not be we may not be there in 5 years. I don't know, but
yeah, it's hard to predict that. I mean, I know, Anya, I'm really grappling with your question because it's a really good question on trajectory. I could say this: it's a program that's not going anywhere. I'm not trying just to buy time and put these kiddos somewhere. You're looking at the graduation numbers right there. That says a lot to you. Our very first year we had 6, and then this year, and I think we got over 54 actually in the end of kids that graduated. So it helps our graduation rates all around, helps these kids get to the next level. And I'm saying all this because, you know, I just said this program is not going anywhere, and it's not, because of what it's doing for kids, what it's doing for well, just that, what it's doing for these students having the program like this. Last year we added middle school, and we added a second teacher, and so I think that's kind of the trajectory, is just trying to support it as much as we can and support the kids' needs as much as we can. And as it grows, those needs kind of present themselves. So, you know, right now we have a full-time teacher and then a paraeducator. This last year we had 2 full-time teachers and a paraeducator that supports. And so, what's its 5-10 year plan? You know, I don't know, but according to this trajectory, it's just growing and growing every year with kids enrolled and graduates. There's a waiting list right now for both programs. And so again, that's because of capacity.
So again,
So
I
I
think
would
that
say,
we need to have some type of outline of a plan of, because like, should this program grow exponentially because of the pandemic, then we would obviously pivot the school of existing school in the way it needs to until the new high school is, you know, operational. Obviously that's a separate conversation. I think that right now what we're trying to look at is addressing the immediate need, which is what you're bringing forward to us. And if we continue, this community continues to grow on the trajectory, looking from two years ago, just 21 graduates. Now in 2020, we had 54. So, you know, if that grows again, and if we have 70 next year, you know, we need to be prepared for addressing that growth. And so like what Sandy said, of like looking at different facilities, how are we going to address the need? How is the district going to address the need? And I think that is going to create a better buy-in community-wise. And like, I agree with Riley saying, you know, like if this was the worst building, yeah, it really sucks that this is what we're offering these students. But it seems like there isn't a third option unless someone else has got a fantastic idea. But I mean, like, I don't know.
No, but at this point, I mean, that's looking forward. We don't have the time to actually make that decision. We just need to decide whether this is a good decision today to start with. And I would generally support it over public opinion, might be, because we're gaining square footage for CTE while putting these students in, from what you guys are telling me, a better environment for their learning and deal with the blowback from the community, if there is any.
What are we lacking right now in CTE, the current CTE design, that we're going to benefit from this?
So,
art space.
Yeah, so right now the current CTE building has the 3 shops, the 3 dry labs, and then essentially 3 classroom spaces. And one of those classroom spaces has a media studio kind of adjacent to it. And as we've met, even since the last time I met with you guys, we've met with Timothy Lucas, we've met with Robin Peters, and the need for those programs was a little greater than what we thought it was going to be. And again, you know, we can work with what we have in the current design. But if we were able to utilize this space, that would give a little bit more flexibility for our photography or media. And then the other classroom in there. So those 3 classrooms, just those gen ed classrooms, are photography, media, web design, and then family consumer science. And so this space, again, I just want to reiterate, if all we have is the current seat or the design that we currently have, we'll figure it out. But if we did have this space, that would free up a little bit more room for either photography or the media.
Well, didn't you say in your paper here, there's 425 more square feet that would go to other CE programs by moving those into the PAC?
Approximately, yeah.
And that 425 feet, I think Brian's at, where would that actually be assigned to?
That'd probably go more towards either the video or photography and give them a little bit more space.
I thought they were going to move to the PAC though.
Nothing's moved to the PAC yet. In this original proposal, I have the video. Timothy Lucas is a little concerned with the roof height and the HVAC system, but it could also work for Robin Peters' program with her setups that she needs to do.
So just kind of tagging on with what Anya was talking about and the growth of the program. For the sake of CTE, I think it's a good idea. Looking at the schedule, the building's not supposed, the high school is not going to fully open until 2023. If the trajectory continues with this program in a similar fashion, 3 years from now, you could potentially have 150 kids in that program, between the two programs.
Well, we could have 150 kids in there right now, Riley, but we're capped at kind of where we are, so that's why we have the waiting list.
Okay. I guess my question becomes, okay, well, say let's move forward with not putting them in, our recommendation is to, keep the 2D, 3D art where it's at. And does this program, does it have to go in that location, or is there other options?
Yeah, we talked about that last time. The issue with if you're referring to like somewhere off campus.
Yeah, and I know we talked about that last time.
Yeah.
You're still doing classes on campus.
Right. Yep.
To be perfectly honest, I'm thinking about Mountain View when I'm saying this, because it's right down the road. But
yeah.
And it's not somewhere that we all told people need to be torn down. So that's kind of where my brain's going.
Yeah, I think my only roadblocks would be if I'm a freshman in high school in the Golden Eagle Academy, I'm walking from my metals class down to Mountain View.
Yeah.
Not a long walk, but also not the safest street there.
Yeah, I guess getting back to my original kind of concern about the building itself, I would be on board with it if we're going to bring that space up to an equitable standard that you can justify reusing the building.
Sure.
And I would, from a construction perspective, I would even go so far as to run it as an alternate, similar to what we're doing with other things. If it's a financial burden, because from my perspective, if you're going to upgrade the building to a usable standard, then you're going to upgrade to usable standard. If you're just going to put a Band-Aid on it, so to speak, with a heating system and some paint, that's when you get into this, well, you lied to us situation. And if you can run it as an alternate, or even a deductive alternate where it's in the base plan and you have a deductive alternate to take it out, then you have justification for the budgetary piece. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, but I don't know. I absolutely understand what you're saying, but I think my approach was just obviously didn't factor all that in. So, I don't know.
Does the committee feel like we are at a place where we can make a recommendation on this?
Was there ever a dollar amount assigned or assessed to the current CTE building, what it would cost to fix it? Or was it just deemed not usable space?
I don't know that information. Mark, do you know?
I don't think there was ever a dollar figure put towards.
Not once the task force decided to tear that building down. The original plan was to tear that building down, right?
Yes.
They decided to not tear it down to save money from demo costs.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
I mean,
So
but
it was
with
never
me-
really a consideration to put enough money in to actually fix it up to be usable.
Okay.
It still isn't. I still don't. I appreciate your idea, Riley, and I have some of the same concerns, but I don't see how we can
Right.
pull money away from the budget of the current, the voter-approved bond projects to put it into, that project.
I think my concern would be, we already have multiple alternates. Are we really going to get to that? I don't know.
How many alternates do we have right now? I know the gym's an alternate.
The Ox Gym is an alternate, and then
greenhouses, I think.
moving the greenhouse and the aquaculture, and also kind of an ag, a little area as well, are all alternates. So it's kind of a long list of, good things. I guess I think where I was coming from, I know, we do a good job of reusing things, and that's where I saw this as a chance to, you have this, I get it, it's not a good facility, and I also agree that I don't, a new facility would be better, but trying to see it as a win-win in some ways, and I think the issue is still the issue of, just appearing to lie.
Well, yeah, I guess if you don't do anything to the CTE other than replace the heating system and put kids in it, we've all lied. I have lied. 100%. And that's where my concern lies. Not that it's not a good idea. I think it's a good idea if done right. But if all we have the ability to do is put a heating system in it, we have all just lied for the past 2 years about the CTE building.
And I would say that's probably where we are.
Yeah, and I just wanted to weigh in that I wouldn't see this going forward, and I don't think it's because it's not a great program in my mind, but I think it again reminds me the lack of capital planning. These students didn't just spring up yesterday. We've known about these students, and it's just a lack of planning all the way along. And I'd just like to see someone come up with a plan that addresses all the buildings and who is in them and how we're dealing with things.
Andy, I don't know what you mean by that.
We had talked a few times about, could this be something that was at Mountain View? Could this be something at a different building? You say K through 12, but could the grades be split up and put in their respective buildings, even though they have medical and mental health reasons for being separated? Could we come up with spreading them out more?
You could, but you would double your staff.
You do have the capacity to cap the program, is that correct?
Yeah, it's capped right now.
And I think that, yeah. I think what,
You know, I think from the board standpoint, you know, when we entertained this, we looked at it as we know that in the planning and drawing, space got squeezed some, and we know that the CTE program felt they didn't have enough space. And there was this possible shift in use of space that Jeremy came up with all his planning and time spent on this. And I don't think it was, I think it's a host of things. It's not lack of planning for this program, but it's a host of things that have sort of come together. The tightness of space, the CTE request for more space, and this growth of this program. I think those things have all kind of pulled together now, and it wasn't that way a year ago, or we weren't aware of it a year ago when we were starting to plan out the square footage and didn't have a design of the building. And so, again, if the committee doesn't feel like it is something they can be behind, then that just is what we need to send back to the board. That you don't think the community will get behind it. I think that there are, you know, I can make just about anything work, but in my mind, I think the tightness of space, the desire for additional space for CTE, the growth of this program are things that weren't in the forefront when we went to the community and planned to tear this building down. We didn't know we would get funds to possibly do renovations in 4 years. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that have changed that have presented us with opportunities. And the main concern we have is we want to be, you know, upfront with the community, and we want to have support for anything that we do with the space. And if the Bond Oversight Committee feels like, despite those factors, it really isn't something that will fly well with our community, then that's what you need to tell us.
The question on there's a $725,000 estimate for keeping the existing 2D, 3D art classrooms in the pack. If this doesn't move, what happened? Where does that money come from or go?
Those are staying in the pack, Riley. Did I?
So I'm sorry, where does this program go if it doesn't go to the existing CTE building?
It stays where it is. Yeah, it stays in the pack. For right now.
Which is where, and if it moves, the video photography rooms go to that location? Is that correct?
Yeah, one of those two, potentially, yeah. Or FCS, I mean, a CTE program, I'll say that, goes into the pack. And that's not hiding anything, that's a test fit thing.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But I would say a CTE program goes to the pack, so it's still in close proximity. But then it benefits the new CT building as well by giving a little bit more flexibility into those spaces. And this pack room, the room that we're talking about, it's a 900 square foot classroom with a 200 square foot office, studio, whatever it will be.
Do you have any general, do you have any non-CTE classes planned right now for the CTE building?
Physics.
There's no room for physics in the main building.
No. Physics uses a dry lab. So they're a little smaller. They don't have the peninsulas. And in the design, that's why the 3 science rooms are stacked. Riley, you could probably speak better to this, but you stack things. And we didn't have a need for, we offer between 3 to 4, 5 on a good year of physics classes. And so it just made more sense from a square footage, from a design, cost savings, to put all the dry labs in one space in the manufacturer, in the CT building. And it fits. I mean, it's, again, looking at master schedule. So that keeps all our, and honestly, it's no different now. Right now in the CT building, we offer science classes as well. Michelle Dunham is not a CT teacher, but she's been in there since I've been there.
Okay.
But we can still fit all of our CTE science lab classes in that space, even with physics using the room as well, one of the labs as well.
So this physics will be there. He'll be teaching 3 classes a day of physics then? I don't know that this is really helpful to the discussion we're having, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, Brian, he'll teach probably 3 on one day and maybe 1 on a second day.
Okay. And
then inside the general ed building, that's where culinary and the DECA are in the new 3-story building. So there is some intermingling of CTE and other programs, which I see as a good thing, to be honest with you.
Just to wrap up where I'm at with this, I think it'd be a great facility to have an alternative high school. I think it's a great location because of transportation, but I'm completely with Riley with what he's saying about putting a Band-Aid on it. I couldn't vote yes or no on a resolution.
I mean, I keep coming back to our bylaws, our charter here, and like in section 2 function, ensure that the bond revenues are used only for the purpose consistent with the voter approved bond measure. And so I keep thinking about, like, how does this fit in with that? It deviates. And, like, while it's a worthy cause, I keep coming back to, this is our charge as the Bond Oversight Committee, and it doesn't necessarily align. But it doesn't mean that it's no less important. So as a community member, I want to say, yes, go for it. I think that things have changed, but I think as the scope of the Bond Oversight Committee, I don't know that it fits within our remit to make a recommendation, honestly. And other than saying that it falls outside of what we said we were going to do. It's disappointing in many ways because it's like, you want the best for the students, and also, like, you want the best for the students, and you don't want to put them in a crappy place. And even if you have addressed the heating issue, great, they're warm, but it's still no less, not the best environment, right? So again, I think I don't mean to diminish anything, Jeremy, when I say it's a Band-Aid situation. I do think there needs to be greater thought, not just by you, but the entire, like, team of board of directors, and more than just the planning principle, but, to inform a larger plan to sell the community on. I mean, ultimately, I hate to say that, but I think that that's what needs to happen.
I was just looking over some of the documents I had back on the bond task force too, and one of our value statements was to understand the district's long-term capital planning. And I think we're in uncharted waters, you know, about who, you know, who's going to be coming to school. You know, how are people permanently changed about this, you know, COVID and learning from home? I mean, how maybe some of the students don't even ever want to go back, and Jeremy's program is going to quadruple. I don't know what it looks like, but I haven't been informed, unless it's back on the bond task force, about long-term planning for the district. And that's the piece I'm not in. I don't have a gauge on the educational programs, and I'd never want to weigh in on that piece. But just from the capital infrastructure piece and what the student population looks like in the different demographics, and personally, I'd still love to see a service boundary area, and you give Double R Ranch back to Blaine. I think they need that area.
Do you suggest we give up our tax base?
I don't know how much would be in Double R Ranch. It seems like your transportation costs would be pretty high going out there too.
That's not even the boundary of the district.
To Double R Ranch?
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
the western, but not the northern.
Right.
So,
Is there any bond committee member who feels strongly that this is something we need to endorse? Because my read is that we're all hesitant to endorse it because it's maybe just outside of our scope, and that it's not what we want. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's not, we don't want to be perceived, or the district to be perceived as lying to the community. That is outside of what the bond scope is.
I guess, sorry, I know you're not asking me, but I think that's why I originally came to you guys. You know, I don't, you know, I've seen your bylaws. It was a long time ago, but, you know, I view this group here as kind of that, you know, I know the board has the inside on, you know, they've seen everything that you guys have seen from Dykeman and Cornerstone, but just telling you why I came to you in the first place is exactly what you just said, Anya. And I understand you know, the argument might more be it's out of your scope, but I think, you know, the community is looking to you guys as the outside endorsement in some way. I know you're, you know, board approved, but there's a lot of trust put in this group. And so that's kind of telling you why I came to you. I is because I know that you're valued, and that's who people are going to ask is all of you. And it's nothing against the school board, obviously, but, you know, I want them to be informed as well. But I know that you guys are that bond oversight, and this is potentially an oversight, correct?
It is an oversight.
Right. So,
Yes.
so I think that's where I'm coming from. You know, I'm not trying to put any, you know, I learned a long time ago not to take things personal, even though I still do. And again, I think I've, you know, tried to capture where my head is in all of this, you know, and trying to make it a win-win. But obviously the thing, you know, we're not liars, Riley. We're not liars.
No, I'm not saying we are.
Will it
I'm
look
saying
like we are?
If we don't improve the building to a usable standard,
Right.
we weren't lying at the time. We believed everything we were saying, but by putting kids back in that space in an unimproved state,
right,
things I have said in the past, fully believing them, are now not true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I'm not saying we're people by definition liars, but statements that I have made and others have made to me and I have reiterated and stood behind,
This would be contrary to that.
this would make those statements no longer true.
So is there a caveat that we could
Sure.
say that
Sure.
without substantial or without improvements to the building, that the, you know, I mean, we would have to put together a statement anyway that says, you know, why we've decided what we decided. And I think that we could put a caveat in there saying that, like, if there were significant improvements done to the building, it may be a viable.
I don't know if we have the funds to even, you know,
Well, and that's the whole point,
say
right?
that. Yeah.
And that's where I was coming from with an alternate is we don't know if we don't have the funds until we don't have the funds, you know, just like we don't know if we have the funds for the auxiliary gym.
Right.
So why is that on an alternate? Well, we've got to see if it bids out and it makes sense financially.
And
You
do
know.
we know that we have, are we sure that we're going to get the SCAP match funds even with the current state situation?
We have no reason to doubt it at this point.
I assume it has to still go through the, you know, whatever, 642 additional deviations.
Yeah, all 47 steps of the D process or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I think for the sake of, you know, the current pace that we're on, you know, I know we need to know. Yeah, it's a tight turnaround. You know, we would have to, yeah, anyway.
I mean, if you're already doing, I'm just trying to think cost-wise, if you're already doing the furnace as part of the existing plan, you're talking about lighting upgrade in 2 classrooms and about probably some plumbing upgrade and some finishes. So I don't know what else would be needed in 2 classroom spaces and a hallway and a bathroom. I mean, I can't imagine it being more than $100 a square foot, 120. If the HVAC's already part of that process. So
Yeah, if you don't think it's a problem not being part of the original scope of the bond work.
well, I think that's, I mean, I would argue that this is absolutely part of our charter is to deal with, these are exactly why this group was formed, was so that these types of things were discussed in advance.
Well, so if that's the recommendation, then yeah, make that as the recommendation. Right? I mean, that fair enough. If that's what you guys really think, if the money needs to be put into the facility, then you know, put it forward that way.
So that would be my recommendation is if you're going to move forward with this process, money needs to be allocated to improve that space to a equitable.
So we need a motion.
You gonna motion, Mark?
Well, let's say that the board supports use of the current CT building for, sorry if I don't use the right acronyms, but for use for those programs based on the school district upgrading the building with, well, it's already heating. So what did you say, Riley? Lighting, plumbing, and
Yeah, I don't know what they would have.
guys?
Eichmann would have to do a walkthrough and determine viability of existing conditions, but you know, they need to bring it up to a equivalent standard. I guess.
Okay, so the BOC would support the use of the current CT building for, like I said, the acronyms for those programs based on the fact that the school district makes up necessary to make it a usable learning environment.
I believe the term is equitable.
Oh, there we go. Sure.
Can we say for educational purposes rather than being specific to this, whatever the acronym is?
SOAR and
Eagles and the virtual.
Virtual Learning Academy.
Golden Eagle Academy and Ferndale Virtual Academy. Rolls right off the tongue.
Riley, did you write that down? Can you reread it back?
No.
Tammy, did you get the gist of that?
Yes, so I think, Mark, you said the box supports use of the current CTE building for the Golden Eagle Academy and Virtual Learning Academy based on the school district upgrading the building with heating, lighting, plumbing, and other finishes, making it an equitable learning environment for students.
Can we add in there the area required for education, so we're not talking about the whole building? Because it should just be that front usable area.
And can we also add, based on the premise that that will give us more space for CTE programs in the current building structure the way it is now designed for the new design?
Do you think it needs to mention the heating, plumbing, or just the equitable standards?
I think
it just needs to say
would be
equitable
better.
standards.
Why
I
not
mean,
be
the
quite
heating's
so
already gonna be
specific?
taken care of. The lighting may be okay. It might just be, you know, certain things might be okay. I think it needs to be reviewed by the design team to say, you know, same thing they're doing with the pack, right? Just bringing it up to current code and standard finishes so it's usable.
Tammy, can you reread that one more time, those changes?
Yes, I've got here, so box supports use of the current CTE building for the Golden Eagle Academy and Virtual Learning Academy based on the school district upgrading those parts of the building to make it an equitable, I think we should add something in there, to make it an equitable learning environment for students.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Including, or did it say something like in the end, including mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and finish upgrades as necessary?
To me, it sounded like we were still talking about the whole building, but Riley, like you said, you're just talking about the area needed for those two academies, right?
Yes.
Sorry,
the two parts that were left out, if that is. So the two parts that need to be added are, yes, Riley's point about just that area for those programs. And number two, based on the fact that it is going to give more square footage for CT programs in the new facility.
And point of clarification, when you say equitable, you're talking equitable to their current room in the pack or equitable to the brand new building?
I think it needs to be the brand new building.
I would say equitable to learning standard of, I mean, you're not going to get it as nice as the new building, but
No, you can't.
but no, and it's a remodel. It's just, you're not going to get the pack as nice as the new building either. So, but I would say of a similar standard of what you're upgrading existing classroom, the same standard that you would be upgrading the pack to.
Okay.
Tammy, do we make that as clear as?
I'll run it past you before I put out the minutes, Mark.
Okay.
Friends, I have to jump off now. I have parental duties, and I'm sorry, Tex, I'm going to miss your report and Mark your report, but I will have plenty of reading to do to catch up. So,
Okay. You want to we'll do a vote quick before you get off. Are you okay with that? Okay. So, does anybody want Tammy to read it again, or they have a general gist of what our recommendation is?
Tammy, if you can read it one more time, make sure it's all there, and then we can move quickly.
Okay, so I have Bach supports use of the current CTE building for the Golden Eagle Academy and Virtual Learning Academy based on the school district upgrading those parts of the building needed as an equitable learning environment for students, including mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and finishing upgrades as necessary.
I motion to make the recommendation.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I am.
Okay. The motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank
Anya.
you.
Okay. On that wonderful note, I think Tex, the floor is yours. Hopefully there are not any significant issues. Tex is gone. He's out. He left.
He was there a second ago.
Yes.
Well, while we're waiting for him, Jeremy, can you talk about the ag alternate that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I can. So we're looking at a space. It's not designed yet. We haven't done any test fits for it yet. All we have from Tony is a questionnaire that all our teachers have filled out, our CTE teachers, gen ed teachers, that kind of informs the architects on what the space is, what the needs are. So we're looking at kind of a facility out there that he could use to bring in animals, to bring in demonstrations, to fire up a rototiller and how to do that. So kind of a space to utilize. And where we're thinking, Brian, is out right next to the alternates for the greenhouse and the aquaculture, just east of the weight room.
Would that just be his permanent teaching space then?
No, it'd be more of like an outdoor lab space or a exterior lab space, not necessarily outdoor. So his teaching space would be in the building in one of those dry labs. But then they could go out there at some point in the class.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
How many
dry?
It's all just a covered area.
You know, Mark, I don't know yet. I haven't seen, Dykeman hasn't drawn it up yet. We just met last week with Tony and got the information from him on that. So not necessarily an outdoor, you know, but something to meet the needs of what he's looking for out there that still provides flexibility for the future.
Well, I'm sorry, real quick. How many dry labs are there in the CT space?
3.
3, okay. And they're all shared?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tex is back.
All right, Tex is back. You're up. It only took 3 hours.
Okay.
Sorry.
A side question, Mark. I don't know, Jamie is still on standby. If you're going to want to still participate.
Jamie's actually going to check out a dumpster fire at the high school. So we'll have to push his report to next time, if that's okay with the committee.
Yes.
Oh, there's so many bad jokes to that. Oh,
Okay.
I was on, not on mute. Sorry.
Okay, so Bond, I'll try to bust these pretty quickly, considering the hour, and stop me or slow me down if you have any questions or want to. But actually, the bond spending for May, actually, the way that the month worked out, and there were no additional expenses that were paid in May. So there certainly were bills rolling in, but be paid in June. So that's just a little side note there. And so there are no new expenditures for May. I'll just briefly touch on the regular bond oversight report, the high school monthly report, and then briefly on the safety and security and bond projects, critical projects. So I'll just hit a few highlights. If you had a chance to read the report, the metal building rebid, and there's some background to that, but good news is the rebids came in lower and then we originally, than the bid 2 weeks earlier. So that was a plus, and it ended up coming $100 and something thousand better than what we had. So that was good news, and that there was no challenge to the bid. It flip-flopped from one bidder to the other. So one of them dropped their price so much, and but no contest, and so that we're moving forward to that. And that's good news because we really need that metal building pre-engineered contractor on board for the continuing design development. And so that's in fact, they'll be joining our first meeting tomorrow. Another highlight, I'll just mention the pre-application meeting with the city. That is set up now. It's going to be next week, July 1. And so that's a big, important, official pre-application meeting. And many of the consultants will be on board for that. And the city's on board. And so it's really, it's another step in the opportunities that we have to really work closely with the city. And I think it's just the perfect timing for it. We're to the point where we're ready for that. Jeremy mentioned a lot of test fit work going on. There's a tremendous amount of time goes into that, but very, very valuable. And then the last thing I was going to mention was the recent site plan. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. Could I share the screen just for a second here? Let me see if it lets me. Oh, there we go. Is that new site plan on your screen?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Just zoom in a little bit here, but process continues on with trying to work out traffic flow and parking, bus traffic, access to the roads, staff parking, parent drop-off that flows really well, appropriate landscaping, but not too much, and it seems to really be coming together well. A lot of thoughts gone into this, and it continues to be refined and developed, but it seems to be coming together very well now. Of course, we'll see where the city is with their thoughts on that when we meet them next week. Okay, and that's it for the regular report. Questions on that one before I go to the critical projects? I'll just briefly mention on the safety and security. Of course, we did probably saw the results of the bidding for the secure vestibules, and we have launched for that. Contractors on board. Permits are just being, part of them are issued. The other part of it is paying for right now are getting issued, and Tiger Construction is on board and launching ahead. They've got their subs out there measuring, getting ready to go, and so we're off and running on one of those big projects, and we're really pleased to have that going. really great to see 3 bidders respond, and the base bids were so amazingly close. We couldn't believe it. More of a variation in the alternates, but we're in good shape there. District maintenance projects, I'll just mention real quickly. Security fencing, we've got things getting finalized there. Actually, we're finalized with the contractor, Northwest Fence. Just finalizing a few things with the city and the fire department as far as access and safety and crash bars on gates and that type of thing. Roofing projects, we actually had another meeting today, and we're continuing to make progress on the Vista and coming up with a game plan that can work with our budgets. Other items on there are self-explanatory, I think, and I think that's probably the highlights for the short version tonight. Is there anything else that you have questions on I can answer? If not, we'll move off of that.
Does the city have the city's never like probably worked with a project this big before. Do they hire consultants to advise them?
Mark, as far as I know, you can confirm if I'm right, but I don't know that they have any additional consultants more than what they usually, the ones that they usually work with. And I guess we'll find out more about that this week. But so far, all of our meetings with the city have been with city staff and not with any other outside consultants. They happen to have one outside consultant that is our consultant too, and that's the Transpo group regarding the transportation access. So we actually think that's a win-win for everybody. And we have our team from Transpo Group that's helping us, and they have a different team that's working with them. But I think it's a positive thing.
Job, Tex. It all sounded really good. I just wish that we could move you ahead in the agenda so you don't have to stick through the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it's a good discussion tonight about the CTE building there, and it's actually good to be a part of that, to fully understand where everybody's, what the thoughts are in the process. That's good. I think it was I was glad to hear the recommendation that you guys came up with tonight. I think it's a good one.
All right. I don't think there's anything else on our agenda at this point. So we have a note here about, well, that's Jamie's piece, which he's middle of a dumpster fire right now. So
Yeah, I may have overstated that. It actually looks like it was just a trash can.
It's a trash can fire.
it sounds better when you say dumpster fire. Very 2020 of you to say dumpster fire. So, okay, well, with that, I will adjourn our meeting unless anybody else has anything.
I'm good. Thank you, Riley.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Yep. Sorry for the late start. We'll get her together next time.
Get her next time. Thanks.